and welcome to another edition of Washington Spotlight. One of the most controversial issues on the world scene involves this bitter conflict between the Arab states and the new nation of Israel in the Middle East. It could explode into another war. We've had a lot of heat on it, very little light. We hope to shed a little more light. Our question today is American foreign policy making for peace in the critical Middle East. And here to discuss it are Mr. James Ansara, Executive Secretary of the Syrian Lebanese American Federation, and Mr. Robert Nathan, Economic Consultant to Peace in the Middle East. Mr. Ansara.
Mr. Childs, I feel that for a period of time, the United States policy towards the Middle East was not making for peace. However, more recently, there are indications that the United States is attempting to take some steps that might bring peace to the Near East.
In other words, you feel that we are on a better track than we were, say, a year ago?
Yes.
Now, Mr. Nathan, how do you feel about this?
Well, Mr. Childs, I'm frank to admit that I don't quite understand what American policy is toward the Middle East. Recently, the visit to the Middle Eastern countries by Eric Johnson as a special emissary of the president to attempt to get some agreement on the water and hydro development out there, I think has been extremely useful and constructive. I think our continued aid to both sides in the Middle East is very useful. But as to what our basic policy politically is out there, I think there's great uncertainty, and I would say that it is in the interest of the Arab countries, in the interest of Israel, and certainly in the interest of free nations of the world, that the United States take a very aggressive position toward bringing peace into the Middle East.
In other words, you believe that we've retrograded rather than a
No, I don't think we've regressed or had a fallback in policy. I think what we lack yet, and I'd say that we've lacked it for a long time, is a firm, positive set of measures which will tend to help bring peace into the Middle East. I think we're still unclear, and we have not moved with any clarification and vigor toward really bringing the two groups that are so hostile to each other together.
Well, now, you spoke about the TVA for the Jordan River, dividing the waters between the Arab states and Israel. Do you think that's a solution as a piece of American foreign policy?
No, I don't believe it's a solution, Mr. Childs, because there are certain political conditions which have to be met before you can go into any economic development.
Could I interrupt you right there?
Yes.
Do you feel that part of the political status is a clear recognition of the existence of the State of Israel?
I think that everybody recognizes the State of Israel.
And
I think the problem is to recognize the existence of over 800,000 refugees who are sitting on the borders, who cannot return to their homes and who are in miserable condition.
I'd like to ask Mr. Nathan at this point about that refugee problem. Do you feel that there can be any solution short of the refugees returning to their homes where they lived before?
Oh, I certainly do, Mr. Childs. There are 800,000 people there, and I feel, just to digress a second, that this Jordan Valley development, whereby this water, which is largely now wasted in terms of irrigation of the land and the development of electric power, if that were developed for all countries that could possibly use the benefits, that would in turn, in and of itself, help absorb these people. I think that the tragic existence of these 800,000 people and the horrible conditions in which they live on relief is something that every human person objects to violently. However, Israel feels that the refugee problem was not of their making, that they didn't push these people out, that the people became refugees largely because of the activities, aggressive activities, they feel, of the countries in which those refugees are now
I'm afraid I would have to disagree with you, Mr. Nathan. It is obvious that we have Arab refugees because some other people came into Palestine. These are people who have lived on the land in Palestine. Their forefathers have lived there for hundreds of years, and they have been driven out by foreign people.
Well, that's a question which I disagree with also. I mean, a statement violently. I think that the best answer is the fact that those Arabs who stayed in Israel after the invasion by the Arab countries have been integrated there. They've been treated equally, and I think they're doing quite well.
I will disagree with you there, too, Mr. Nathan.
I've been there and seen. I've been in the centers of Arab population in Israel in the last couple of years, and I think they're doing quite well. The problem is, though, that these people really weren't driven out. I think that when the United Nations voted partition between Israel and the Arab part of Palestine by democratic process, the Arab countries invaded Israel. Israel didn't chase the refugees out. They went out.
You will recognize, Mr. Nathan, that the Arab armies, the neighbors of Israel, did not get into the fighting until months after the fighting broke out in Palestine between the Jews and the Arabs of Palestine.
But could I interrupt you both at this point? Regardless of how they got out, there are 800,000 refugees in these camps, and they represent, apparently, the biggest obstacle to peace in the area.
Undoubtedly.
Would you say, Mr. Ansara, that these refugees could be settled elsewhere, other than on the lands on which they once lived?
Mr. Childs, the Arab refugees, like all peoples, want to return to their homes. At least they say they do. There is also the question as to whether the Arab countries can absorb them economically. Now, the Arab countries have sheltered them. They are in Arab lands and are doing all they can for them at the present time. But even deeper than that, there is a principle involved. What right has any country to drive out, and I insist they were driven out, and not allow those people to return home?
I'd like to get this back again on the problem of resettlement.
Well, because I think it's obvious that Mr. Ansara and I disagree completely as to whether they were driven out or whether the Arabs induced them to come out, and that's a basic fact which I think that time...
Well, what I want to say, that aside from whether they were driven out or not, it's my conception that under international law, a country, a belligerent, is required to take back, people who lived in that country, refugees who were outside because of the war. Is that so?
I'd like to hear you.
That depends really on what the provisions are of the United Nations agreements. See, when the United Nations originally partitioned Palestine into Israel and Arab Palestine, then there was no problem of refugees of any kind. There wouldn't have been had that petition gone ahead peacefully. Today they've moved out. Now, as to whether or not Israel should take them back or has to take them back or can take them back, I think that one thing must be recognized, that Israel in the last 4 years or 5 years has taken in some 800,000 refugees, of which over 300,000 came from the Arab countries. People who left all their resources there when they left and they came in. In addition, when the refugee problem originated, there were 45,000 Arab refugees in Israel.
When you say that...
those have been absorbed. No, but I want to emphasize those have been absorbed by Israel. Today, there's no more United Nations refugee problem of Arabs in Israel because they've absorbed the 45,000. The Arab countries have absorbed none of these people that moved in there, and in fact, they're isolated, and I think it's unfortunate and almost inhumanitarian that they haven't been allowed to be integrated in those countries.
Have you a comment on that, Mr.
Yes, first, I am not sure of Mr. Nathan's figure of the number of Jewish refugees who have come from the Arab countries. I think his figure is rather large. We know that there are Jews living in Lebanon, Syria, and Palestine who are very happy and are Arab citizens of those countries. Secondly, you have to remember that the Arab refugees who are in the Arab countries do not want to be settled anywhere but in their own homes. And that's a basic problem.
And yet,
I'd like just a moment to get this back to an American focus. Recently, the Secretary of the Arab League, Mr. Hassouna, was in this country, and he made this point, that Americans do not get a fair picture because of prejudice in American the press and so on. Do you believe that's true, Mr.
I certainly do believe it's true because of my own experience, Mr. Childs, as the executive...
You believe that prejudice keeps the Arab viewpoint from being told properly?
Yes, one of the things that we worry very much as my federation is getting more information to the American people.
I'd like to hear Mr.
Well, I read the press, I think, in the major papers and the minor papers, and it seems to me while we may have what's charged as a one-party press politically here, I'm not sure that's even right, but it seems to me that as one reads the major papers and listens to the radio, and especially follows the UN debates and the open forums, that there is a real opportunity for both sides. Now, I have a feeling that the American people are greatly sympathetic with these refugees and want to help them, and as a matter of fact, do make contributions.
Well, it's American money that's partly
right.
sustaining them, isn't it?
The United States provides for both sides about around 125, 150 million direct and through the UN. But I think that the Americans have heard this story and should continue to hear it. The important thing is that the Americans, it seems to me, want peace. And what has been accomplished is a complete intransigence, or what exists. And there just doesn't seem to be a willingness on the part of the Arab countries to sit down and work it out.
Just a brief comment before we close.
Mr. Childs, the policy of the United States, which I am hopeful about at the present time, is that for the first time, the United States is recognizing that the Arabs might have some rights in the Near East.
I'm sorry to cut you off. Thank you, Mr. Ansara, and you, Mr. Nathan, for a most interesting discussion on this critical problem. You have just heard the opposing opinions of two outstanding personalities on a subject of national importance. The purpose of American Film Forum is to bring you each month, in sight and sound, leaders in our national life, discussing a wide variety of domestic and international issues. We cannot resolve any of these problems in this brief presentation. However, it is important that the issues be fairly and impartially stated. We invite you, our audience, to continue the discussion where we have terminated. We hope you found this month's forum stimulating. We shall be with you again next month, when we will discuss another topic of national importance. This is, meantime, your moderator, Marquis Child.